Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Before we get into today's story, let's take care of some business. First, I wanted to thank those of you that took the time to leave reviews for both the Shunned podcast and my original podcast called This JW Life. We were at 99, and I asked for at least an extra review to hit 100, and we're well over 100 now. Plus, we kind of covered some of the negative trolling reviews by certain people with some positive and true reviews of the podcast. So, if you haven't heard the latter, the This JW Life podcast, that's my personal story, and it's an organized dive into how the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses works. Second, I want to thank Eileen for being the latest to sign up to support what I do on patreon.com. Her $10 donation will get one of our shunned pandas sent her way, so she can have her own little slice of the panda paradise that we were promised as J-Dubs growing up. If you want to support my work, which goes far beyond this podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/shunned. You can even get a panda yourself or join in our monthly online meetup. I'll really appreciate all the support that you show, more than you know right now. Honestly, right now the donations really help because I've had to take a step back from my cleaning business for at least a month due to my bad back. I hope to return if possible. Right now, I'm not really sure what my future holds. So any and all support is greatly appreciated. And I'm just trying to make my way in different ways. So I want to put a call out for anybody that's interested in getting some personal coaching. As some of you know, I am a certified life coach, and I offer both a 4-week group coaching course, kind of aimed at former Jehovah's Witnesses, but I need a group of 4 to 6 people in order to do that. Right now, I have one person that's reached out to me that wants to join a group, but I need a group. So if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, let me know. Also, I offer personal one-on-one coaching. It can be cult-related, but it doesn't have to be. Anything in life where you feel stuck or just want to improve or bounce ideas around is something that we can work on together. It can be personal, business-related, relationship-related, whatever it is. If you know me from this podcast, you know that I love to help talk through these things. I'm really looking forward to expanding my coaching right now, as this could end up being my primary focus in the future with my physical limitations that are currently restricting my work. So if you'd like to engage in personal coaching, if you have a friend or family member that might be interested, send them my way and I'd love to help. Go to shunnedpodcast.com/coaching for more information and to contact me. Or just email me at shunnedpodcast@gmail.com and let's talk. Okay, so I've got some more cool things going on, but we'll go over those things after we meet today's guest. In fact, there's something she mentions that I'm going to explain after the interview so that you'll understand. Today we're talking with Andie, formerly one of Jehovah's Witnesses. This story really involves so many things. First, we're talking about a family that goes all the way back to the Rutherford days of the organization. Second, Andie was beat up for her beliefs. She was forced to move a lot for a reason that you're not going to see coming. She spent time in Mexico to try to build an English-speaking congregation, but she had to come home for another reason that you're not going to see coming. She talks openly about self-harm, about her own horrific rape, about living in her car, and thoughts of suicide. So Andie was one tough young lady that dealt with a lot and came out the other side and should be very proud of herself. As a quick production note, before we jump into the story, there are a few audio issues with Skype. It happens sometimes. There's not a lot that can be done about it. I can't edit around that. People have varying connection quality when we do these calls, and it is what it is, but it does get better. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet Andie.
Hello, my name is Andie. I'm 28 years old. I was born and raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I am shunned.
All right, so you kind of let us know there that you were born and raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So how did your parents come into the religion, or do you know how many generations it goes back?
So it is 3 generations on my mom's side and 4 generations on my dad's side.
Wow, you're in deep.
Yes, there was no other option growing up. There was no other discussion of other religions other than disproving them growing up. Trying to anyway.
So if it goes 3 or 4 generations back, I don't know.
My grandmother my great grandmother on my dad's side was one of the first followers of Rutherford after Rutherford took over.
Oh, wow. Gotcha.
Yes. So when he started making trips into the lower parts of the U.S. and into Mexico, that's when she really got involved with it.
Wow, he was an interesting character.
You could say that.
Yeah. And I didn't say interesting in a good way, but yeah.
Yeah, but one of his groups that had gone down south went into the border near Brownsville, and that's where my great grandmother was at the time because she had just married a soldier, and they had 6 children together.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and he was not the greatest to her, so she was kind of vulnerable in that way. And I do think that after hearing all the stories that she was somewhat targeted. So,
Oh, well, yeah, even if she wasn't targeted, even if they didn't know that going in, as soon as they met her and found out she had those vulnerabilities, it would be easy for her to fall prey.
yeah, and it actually came down to her choosing between her husband and the religion, and she chose the religion.
Of course.
And so she was alone with those 6 kids in the religion.
Wow. That's quite an origin story. That's not something that you don't. I don't know that I've if I don't know, I may have, but I'm not sure I've interviewed anybody who went that far back to the
Yeah,
Rutherford days.
so when you there's always those families that have been in the religion forever that everybody kind of points to. If you're, if you grew up a Jehovah's Witness, that's, what I'm talking about. There's those families that stand out, and my family was one of those families.
Yeah.
So, definitely, whether I wanted to be or not, I was pointed to as, an example. And unfortunately, my parents, well, I don't know if it's unfortunately, but the situation was growing up that my parents went back and forth between being very strong and very inactive. And whenever they were inactive, that kind of marked me and my younger sister in a way that, other people didn't really want to hang out with us very much. So,
Yeah,
and a
you
lot of that
definitely get
had to do
labeled.
with, yeah. So,
all right. So how was it, growing up in the religion and going back so deep like that? How did you? Because your parents, it sounds like, were kind of in and out. Did it soften in any way? The worldview that you were given as far as the how you saw the people on the outside, or were you just as staunch as the typical witness who sees everybody on the outside as these, bad or scary worldly people and, that kind of a
I
view?
would say I was probably worse.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was really in. I mean, when I was 11, I got baptized. When I was 14, I actually moved to Mexico with some friends of my family's and went and started an English congregation over there. And I helped with the hurricane relief work, got up at sunrise and worked till sundown with them. I was a regular pioneer. I mean, I was in.
Wow. So do you think that was kind of compensating maybe for your parents? Like, do you feel like maybe because they weren't always so active, you kind of took this mantle as your own?
I think I did a lot. My grandfather was very close to me, very, very close to me. And um, he was a prime example of practicing what you preach. Like, he was a Jehovah's Witness, but he was a very kind person. He had a lot of compassion for people, and he was looked to as an example in the congregation of everything you should be. He did a lot of charity work. He was a good man. I will say that, there are good people inside the Jehovah's Witness organization, and he
Oh
was
yeah.
one of them. Um, And when he died, my parents kind of dropped off the map. And so it was really me and my sister. And at that point, me and my sister were homeschooled. So there was like a lot of pressure on me kind of to step up into several roles that I feel like changed me in a lot of ways
Yeah, I
growing up. I
bet.
don't think I had to, it was like at that point, like, okay, now I'm kind of half kid, half adult here because I've got to take care of my sister and help her with school because my mom had cancer.
Mm.
So, and she was in a couple car accidents, and both my parents drank quite a bit. So there was a lot of stress there, and I was just trying to like keep it together and keep our business private from the congregation. And part of that I felt like was putting up a front for the congregation, like, oh no, my parents are great. Look at how great I'm doing. So you know that they have to be great because they raised me.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that overcompensating on your part, and why you would take on that role. Um, your parents, it sounds like, had a lot going on. Um,
A lot.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so what was life like at home? I mean, it sounds like, how was the environment? I mean, was it, when you have people who are drinking a little too much, that can be a mixed bag. So, what was life like for you and your sister at home?
There were some days that were amazing and we were just us, and it's like we'd forget about everything else and we'd just go out and have fun, and we'd rent movies and make Kool-Aid and popcorn and just have fun us. And then there were other nights when my mom's pain would be really bad, and so she'd be in the bottom of a bottle, and so my dad would drink because he was stressed out. And then me and my sister were kind of left to our own devices. We lived on our own for a while, but after my grandfather passed, we moved in to a bigger house with my grandmother, and my grandmother was very abusive to me,
Mm.
mentally, emotionally, and physically. So it's hard to say that I was in any. It wasn't a good environment, but then it wasn't always a bad environment either.
Right, right. Well,
So
I think that's the case. That's just really something that you see in humanity. Like, um, most people are not all good or all bad. Even people that sometimes do really horrific things in life. I remember hearing, there was a podcast about a guy. I can't remember who the guy was who lived above him in this apartment complex, but the guy was a serial killer, like a notorious serial killer. And the serial killer like bought him a like a helmet or something for him riding around on his bicycle, because he was like, you got to be safe. But all along
yeah,
he was a serial killer. Like, people people are so complicated. We're complex. You can't boil us down to any really like one event. Um, and I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things about us, is that we're so complex, but it's also one of the things that makes it really hard when you look back, particularly at a childhood, to understand, because it is such a mixed bag, and you do have those absolutely beautiful and wonderful moments with people that also give you these sometimes very awful moments.
exactly. And it's just like I can remember having so much fun with my grandparents when my grandfather was still alive, like, but later on, I don't, later on, it just became a nightmare.
Yeah, maybe he
Like, it
tempered
got to
her
the point,
some.
I think he tempered her a lot.
Gotcha.
um, I mean, I can remember him tempering her whenever she would go to tell me the way something looked on me or something like that. He'd be like, "Mary, you don't need to be saying that."
Mm.
Like, he he tempered her a lot. So one of the things that bothered my grandmother so much about me was because I was an early bloomer, and so I had a curvaceous figure from a very early age. And I'm also not, I've never been particularly skinny, and she's obsessed with the way her body looks, and she kind of imposed that upon me.
Yeah.
And it didn't help that my sister you know, I love my sister. No, I'm not saying anything bad about her. She didn't do anything to encourage my grandmother's behavior, but my sister has always naturally been a very slender, tall, blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful young woman.
Yeah.
So, and I just don't look like that.
Right, right.
I'm I'm not saying that I look bad in any way. I'm just saying I don't look that traditional girl next door look. That's not me.
Well, and it's not if your grandmother was that obsessed with looks in that way, um
Yeah.
yeah, she's gonna probably, did she try to shame you a lot?
A lot,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And then of course being developing inside a cult isn't always
Yeah.
a comfortable thing anyway, with all of the talk about modest dress and I mean, I've interviewed other women who have said basically that, I mean, it's just because they had a body, period, they were kind of shamed for that, in the congregation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember one time I bought this dress and it was to my ankle, a turtleneck dress, but it was like that t-shirt material, so it wasn't tight. It fit me well, but because it was too clingy, I got pulled in the back room over it. And I'm like, you guys told me to cover up more. I'm in Louisiana in a turtleneck, and you're telling me that I'm still showing off my body too much? Like,
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
know.
just your
I
fault for
was
having
really
a body.
frustrated.
Yeah.
Yes, I was really frustrated that one time because I was like, seriously? I'm wearing a turtleneck for crying out loud.
Yeah, it's really sad because it's something we laugh at, but it's just really, I mean, it's unfair, and it's putting young women in a situation where they can't win. I mean, what are you supposed to do? And then it would be very easy from that to start hating your own body, because it's essentially betraying you in this cult where you're being judged adversely for something that's completely out of your control.
And I did hate my body.
Sure.
I self-mutilated a lot, in places that people couldn't really see, but I mean, it was psychologically damaging to me growing up,
Sure.
and it translated into actual physical abuse
So,
by my hand.
yeah. So um did you so it sounds like you were a cutter of some sort. Did you cut, or whatever you did, out of like a self hatred for the body, or was it just to, because I know a lot of times something like
I
that
feel
is
like
to find a sense of control.
I feel like it was more just an escape and
Mm,
yeah, probably control.
yeah.
Like I was hurting so bad that I wanted to die, and just instead of focusing on that, having a moment to focus on something else, which was the pain, the blood, the way that the skin looked, like something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've really heard that described as, it's almost, I've heard some people on another podcast I listen to talk about it as almost being euphoric. There's almost
Yeah,
a high from it.
yeah, it really is. You know, and that's terrible that at, I'm talking about starting when I was 12, 13 years old, like that I felt that bad about myself.
I'm really glad you mentioned that though, because um, I think that self mutilation, cutting, whatever however it happens, or whatever you want to call it, I think that that's pretty prevalent, really, in a lot of young people, maybe even older ones. I don't know, but I think that that goes on a lot more than people talk about, and
Absolutely.
and it completely makes sense as to why it would, in an environment where you have no control and where you're being shamed and you're so miserable.
Yeah, and I mean, and we talked a little bit about my education background before you started recording, but just to go back to that, the reason I'm so open with it now is because of that education. I went
Mm.
to college for human services and a focus in psychological studies, and I'm now in my master's program for social work. And it's not talked about enough. And it is very serious and it is a problem. And I think that people need to know that just because it happened doesn't make them less of it, make them weird. It just means that they went through something extreme on the inside and they needed to manifest it physically on the outside.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that point. You know, it's the internal being manifested on the outside. It's it completely makes sense when you really sit down and think about it. It's just sad that people
I'm
have
not
to be pushed to
saying
that
that
point.
people should do that. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
if they have, they shouldn't be like scared to say, like, yes, that was me at one point.
yeah. There's nothing. Yeah, we're certainly not encouraging it, but it's
Yeah,
nothing
this was
to be ashamed of or feel like you're a bad person or something. You're just hurting and don't have a lot of options or tools, and it's sad that you grow
I
up in an
mean,
environment that does
something,
that.
yeah. Because that's something the Jehovah's Witnesses teach is like, the body is your temple, and if you mutilate it in any way, it's a sin against God. And mental health and your relationship with God, I mean, those are two completely separate issues.
Yeah,
You know, if you're sick and God is supposed to be this being of infinite love and understanding, you don't think he understands that you're sick or that you're
right.
hurting?
Absolutely, you would think so. That
So it was shamed within the religion, and since the religion was so inside of me from being raised and having my whole family, all my cousins, everything, like people talk about extended family and stuff, all my extended family were witnesses, really, because it was so many generations back.
yeah, I bet. So you had mentioned earlier that you were homeschooled. How early did that start? Were you always homeschooled?
No, I was homeschooled shortly after 9/11,
Mm,
which I was in the fourth grade. So after 9/11, like I've mentioned, I'm in the South, so very red states over here, and I, as a Jehovah's Witness, was not allowed to salute the flag in school. And other kids saw that, and other kids started beating me up really bad to the point where I had broken bones. So at that point, I was pulled out of school.
wow, really? Wow. I mean, I didn't have to be in school during a time quite like that. And like you said, you're in a state where patriotism is probably taken pretty seriously. So they really, literally, physically just beat you to the point of having broken bones because you wouldn't stand for the flag?
Well, I mean, I didn't stand for the flag, and so they came at me at recess and asked me why, and I said, well, I'm not supposed to, it's against God's law and stuff like that. And, this is a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but that's what I was
Yeah.
talking to them about. And then it became, oh, so you think you're better than us
Mm,
because of
okay.
that. And then it was several kids started beating on me. We were right next to a tree, an oak tree, and they have the big roots and everything.
Yeah.
And one of the kids stepped on my arm
Wow.
and broke it. So it did get bad. And my sister the same week um got beaten into a fence to the point where like you could see the bruising of the fence line on her back. So we
Wow.
both got beat pretty bad and we got pulled out of school that week. We never went back.
Wow. And I mean, first of all, that's such an awful way to, experience consequences of that. But it's also just an awful last memory of, being around, quote, the world or the outside because you're just about
Yeah.
to be taken, to homeschool where you're going to be severely isolated, most likely. Um, how was that
Yeah.
change for you?
It was rough because like I had friends in school. I was like school really was one of the only places where I had friends. I mentioned before my mom had cancer. She had cancer a few times. And so we moved around a lot. Also, my dad had warrants for his arrest in a couple states because he had previously been a drug dealer and he never like answered
Whoa.
for those charges. So we had to move around quite a bit just to keep him out of jail and also to get my mom special cancer treatments. So I didn't have time to make friends in the congregation really until we moved back to the South. And by then, you know, people were already so much in their cliques that it was really hard for me to make friends here, which is why I think I was so gung-ho to be a missionary, because it meant I got to go somewhere else and people would want to be my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, you know, having that title of a missionary or pioneer or whatever, like that kind of gets you friends too. People start to
It
look up
does.
to you a little bit. Um, so I have to ask, so your dad had charges.
Yeah.
Did that impact his standing in the congregation in any way? I mean, everybody, were they just all kind of cool with him not ever taking a stand for that, or?
Um, I don't really know that at that when I'm talking about us moving for that, that's when I was really young.
Gotcha.
I know that when my dad first came back, he was on restriction for like, I think he said it was 6 months. I'm not sure, but I don't recall anything after that.
And when you say come
Like,
back, was he disfellowshipped for the charges?
my dad was disfellowshipped for drug use for a long time. My dad was actually out for like 15 years.
Gotcha.
And he came back when my mom had my sister, and I was like 3 or 4.
Hmm.
So my sister was like 1, and I was like, yeah, so I would be 3, almost 4, when he started to come back.
It's interesting sometimes what makes a person come back. It seems like anecdotally having children at times seems to be a catalyst for people to suddenly find God or whatever the case may be, to start looking outside themselves, I guess, for things. And
Yeah.
yeah, that happens a lot. Um, I don't know. I just, there's something rattling around in my head. You know, it's, I guess, the dichotomy between your dad having these issues and these charges, and like, you know, there's
Yeah.
the congregational judicial system, and then there's the outside judicial system, and it
Well, I
always
would say we were
intrigues
running
me.
from the outside problems way longer than my dad was disfellowshipped for, or
Right,
reproved. I don't know exactly what the situation. I think he was disfellowshipped, but very short time,
right.
and then he had his restrictions taken away for a very short time,
Yeah, it's just always
and then
it's intriguing though how a
I remember.
person can have these things on the outside. I mean, it's just like you think about it with child abuse. There are people who, as long as it's kept within the congregation walls, or as long as they don't, it doesn't become a police matter or a matter on the outside, they just handle it internally, then that seems to be okay. But, you know, a person could still have
Yeah.
to face charges on the outside that could put them away. And it seems like the congregation doesn't really care about that. It's just interesting
I
how
agree.
you don't have to pay for things on the outside, and you can still be okay on the inside, inside the congregation.
And like, I think that the congregation is really just a great hiding place for sexual predators.
It
I
is.
really do feel that because of the way that they handle child sexual abuse. Um, this is much different story, but we'll talk about, I'm sure, when that happened to me. But like, they do keep it so much on the inside.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
So much on
people.
the inside.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sad.
Absolutely. All right. So you talked about, you know, kind of what life was like at home. So now you've gone into homeschool. Talked about at the Kingdom Hall how you kind of had a tough time, you know, making friends, which unfortunately is something that many of us can relate to. The cliquish nature of the congregations. It's really hard to get in sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, how'd you feel at the Kingdom Hall? Like it sounds like, you know, you got baptized pretty young and things like that. So were you kind of was that did you feel like you fit in there even though you didn't have a lot of friends, just because you were able to do so much in the congregation?
I did. I felt like I fit in with the older people. Like I had a lot of I wouldn't really call them friends, but I would guess role models that I felt close to in the congregation. So one thing is like a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses know Gary Bro. He's up in Bethel. Well, he's on the videos and he does a lot for the organization up there, but his mom was in my home congregation.
Ah.
And so I grew up knowing Gary and Ruby, and I would spend a lot of time over at the Bro house, like a lot of time. So Evelyn was she was um she was also she was very opinionated, but she was also very sweet, and she made me feel very comfortable around her. So, a lot of that was the religion and also just the era that she grew up in. But
Sure.
like she was a very sweet older woman, and I felt like she was more my grandmother than my actual grandmother. So
Well,
that
that's
was
cool.
hard because she passed a few years ago. With me being on the outside, I was not able to attend the funeral.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so petty. Um, but it was nice. I'm glad that I don't know, that you had that relationship with her. Especially it sounds like in contrast to the relationship with your own, some of the relatives in your own family and some of the abuse that you encountered. It sounds like maybe she was a soft place to land in some ways.
Yeah, she was. She's very hard on me, but you know,
Yeah.
I think that was also good too because like so very few people were. Um my parents were hard on me when the mood suited them. But she was hard on me when I actually stepped out of line.
Well, yeah,
And there is that big that's a big difference.
yeah, and there's being hard on a person just to be hard on them, and there's being hard on them because you have expectations of them that they, kind of be their best, and you kind of hope you're kind of trying to help them be the best version of themselves rather than just being hard on a person for the sake of tearing people down.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there was always still that us versus them mentality, but at least when I was around her, I felt like part of the us
Yeah.
because I didn't really feel, everybody talks about, Jehovah's people need to be at this tight knit unit and everything, but I didn't feel that way.
Yeah. No, I understand. I had a
So
hard time fitting in as well with that supposed loving family and everything that the religion was supposed to be. Um, so you got married at 11. Was that something? Not married. Wow. You
uh,
got
uh
baptized. Well, you were in the South. You got
not that far. Come on.
you got baptized at 11. Um, what kind of precipitated that? Did you feel pressure to? Was it just, internally you just wanted to do this thing? You really loved Jehovah? Or like what kind of, brought you to that point at such a young age?
It was a combination of really wanting to do something that would make other people happy, and also I did really love Jehovah. Like I was very much so attached to God, and I would say prayer was my main respite as a kid. Growing up, being abused at home and at school, and not feeling like I fit in, I could go to God in prayer and kind of escape all of that for a little bit and just talk to someone,
Yeah.
and just having someone to talk to. I know a lot of people are, when they leave the Jehovah's Witness religion, kind of veer towards atheism and such. And then some people remain Christian. I've remained Christian because that one person that I could always talk to was God. So, and that hasn't changed for me.
Nice. So it sounds like it was kind of a soft place for you to land, you know?
Yeah, it was. It was,
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody,
you know,
takes their own path as far as that goes. Um,
yeah.
so you you get baptized pretty young, and good for you. It sounds like, I mean, I think we all did it on some level because we wanted to please others or whatever, but it sounds like it did really truly mean something to you. Um,
Yeah. It definitely did. And also, my grandfather died less than a month before I actually got baptized.
oh
So it
wow.
was very emotional time for me. Um, it was announced that I was going to be one of the ones to get baptized the week before he died. So he knew I was going to get baptized, but then he passed away before it actually happened.
Oh wow. Um, that
So it
that's
was because he was the presiding overseer in our hall. So, like, it was a big deal to him.
well, yeah, it was a big deal to him, and he obviously really cared about you too, and seemed to be a genuinely good person. So,
Yeah.
that's a big loss right before that time. But I mean, I guess at least he did know that you were going to do that, and I'm sure that gave him some comfort, because he truly cared, and he knew that you were taking that step, which obviously meant a lot to him at the time. Um, so you say you kind of went from that. You started. Did you start pioneering? I mean, because you said at 14 you moved to Mexico. I mean, like that's
Yeah.
in 3 I mean, first of all, that's very young, but second of all, I mean, that's in 3 years, a lot has happened. So, how did
I
that
was,
progress?
so I was an auxiliary pioneer, um, starting 2 months after I got baptized until until I got reproved later, much later. So I was an auxiliary pioneer, and then I became a regular pioneer later and moved to Mexico. Um, I was in Mexico for 6 months my first trip, 3 months my second trip, and I went for another 4 months later. But the trips were very close together. So I mean, I was there that whole year and a half period. I was really mostly in Mexico.
So, who do
So
you go with? I mean, being so young, and it sounds like your parents probably didn't qualify. So, did you just go with other family, or?
only on the last trip my grandmother came, which I was not excited about, but
Oh, yeah.
I went by myself. We had hosted a family from the city that I went to, um, whenever he was over here working and the hurricane hit and he didn't have a place to stay. So this was before Rita. It was one of the earlier ones. But anyway, so we hosted him, and then there was an opportunity in his hall, but they were short on missionaries to go to that area. So since he had made so many friends, he offered to host anybody who wanted to come and help. And I talked to my parents, and knew him, knew his family, and everything. Let me go with him and his family while I was serving over there.
Okay, so sorry it dropped off a little bit there at the end, but it sounds like so this brother was here during hurricane relief, and you got to know him there, and then when he went back home to Mexico and they needed some help down there, then you were just able to go down there and stay with him and his family.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
I mean that makes sense. That's so, I mean that's basic networking, to some extent, to
Yeah,
to find new people. So how did that go for you when you were down in Mexico?
I would say it's probably one of the happiest times of my entire childhood.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I cried when I was frustrated because, the language barrier was difficult.
Yeah.
Only spoke a little bit of Spanish at the time. I was learning Mexican Sign Language, which I'm now fluent in. But, there's that learning curve, and only 3 people that I knew in the whole country spoke English. Like I was in an area where they didn't really speak a lot of English. So I was, because this wasn't like just over the border. This was it like in the middle of Mexico.
So you were deep in.
Yeah. So also a lot of people stared at me, I remember, because I was like the only white person for miles and miles around. So
Yeah.
it was definitely an experience, but I feel like I learned a lot about culture and also accepting the way other people do things. It forced me to be a lot less rigid. I was a very, very rigid child. We talked about all the pressure that I was under, so that definitely had an impact on my personality.
Oh yeah, I
Just
think
being,
most of us growing up in the cult had an amount of rigidity to us.
yeah, well, it was really bad. Like I would start hyperventilating if things weren't going my way.
And then you get sent to a country where you don't speak the language, and I'm sure that
Nothing's in my control at all.
yeah, that's a humbling experience and gives you a lot of perspective, I'm sure, at that age.
Yeah, I really did. I really do feel like I came back a different person. Like it changed me a lot. I grew up a lot. You know, it was also a great experience because I wasn't responsible for anybody else but myself for the
Yeah.
first time, really. Because I have lots of cousins and I'm the oldest, and so I was always taking care of everybody. Everybody always dropped their kids off with me, even though I was just a kid myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I had a lot of responsibility, and I felt like I was responsible to a lot of people. But when I was there, the only thing I was really responsible for was going out in service in English and teaching other people English and doing my own stuff. That's all there really was on me. So I was really happy just to not have so much on my shoulders.
Yeah, it was probably very freeing.
Yeah, it really was.
So how did
So,
so you once you come back, it sounds like you're 15 and a half, 16, whatever. Um, how did you? Well, first of all, how did you kind of play out the whole school thing? Did you just keep
oh,
doing like homeschooling throughout these years to graduate at 18, or did you graduate early, or how'd that work for
I
you?
I graduated at 14. I
Whoa.
finished my program really fast as soon as I had enough money to order it because my parents did not care if I went to school, honestly. My sister only, we ordered the 8th grade books, but she never completed them. So, like, education was not a huge priority in the house.
Yeah,
So,
that happens a lot.
yeah. So, but I did odd jobs and I ordered books and I completed my program at 14. I did later go and get a GED
Hmm.
when I was 19 for for job reasons because
Sure.
not every job accept a homeschool diploma. So, but I finished high school and at the time I thought that was good enough. So I went to Mexico with no school, no responsibilities other than just to do the English stuff like I had said.
Wow, that's a unique experience graduating so young and then being able to take off to Mexico and serve in that area. Um, how what was it like when you came back? How did you adjust back into life and where did life take you from
Oh, it
there?
was awful. Awful. First off, the reason I came back was not because my trip was over, but it was because I contracted West Nile.
Oh no.
So I was sick. I was really, really sick. And I was sick for like 6 months. Like it was bad. Because I spoke a different language and the translation was not going good because I couldn't talk a whole lot anyway by the time we finally realized what was wrong. I was on my way back, and I really legitly remember being in the Morehouse house. And then, like, I remember being in and out, and all of a sudden I'm home. And there's not a whole lot in between there. My fever was so high, and I was so out of it.
Wow. Is that something that sticks with you, like a Lyme disease? Or is that something that
Yeah.
once you're done with is just done?
Um, it does stick with you. It compromises your immune system.
Gotcha.
So, and I was already high risk for autoimmune disease, and so now I do suffer from celiac disease, and they're testing me for rheumatoid arthritis, which is hard to diagnose because if you're not in an active flare-up, it won't show up on a blood test.
Wow.
So,
Wow. So it sounds like it was a tough ending, to your trip, and such a, I don't know, such a slap back to a harsh reality when you came back. I mean, with not only the illness, but also coming back to the congregation that you were struggling in at times and everything. Um,
yeah.
did so
It
when
was, it, sorry,
oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say when somebody, so like when a person quits pioneering, or something like that,
Oh, I didn't
oftentimes they're
quit
looked.
pioneering at that point.
What's that?
I didn't quit pioneering at
Oh
that
no,
point.
I know that. I know that. But what I'm saying is
Okay.
when a person has a privilege and then they are no longer doing that for some reason, even though they were doing a good thing, often above and beyond what the other publishers in the congregation are doing, when they are kind of brought back down to earth a little bit, people tend to look at them a certain way. And so I'm wondering, when you came back and so you were no longer this like missionary type person, even though you were still pioneering, did you get any blowback from that, or did people kind of look at you side eyed because you weren't doing this other big thing anymore?
Yeah. I got a lot of questions as to when I was going to go back to Mexico, or, what was my plan. Um, and I didn't know. Like, I was so sick, and I really didn't know, and I was just trying to focus on, just getting enough hours to be a pioneer. Like like that was my only thing. I didn't want to lose that privilege too. And then also, I was coming back to, because in Mexico, like, yes, I was in somebody else's house, but they didn't treat me like I was their kid. Like, they treated me with love and respect, but they treated me like an adult. Like, I had a job to do. I went to my job, came home, I would cook, I would, you know, do things for myself. I was in charge of my own money. It was really like being an adult. And then I came back, and all of a sudden I've I'm back in this child situation where I had very limited freedoms because my parents pulled in the reins a whole lot after that, which I can understand. I mean, they let their child go do something, and then they come back and they're like, almost dead. So I can understand why they did it now. At the time, I didn't.
Yeah, that's a harsh reality to come back to. Oh, look, these people have only, they've seen you since you were a little kid, and they kind of might still view you in a certain way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I'm sure there's the control issues with you being so sick, and then when you came back, I'm sure they really wanted to not hold you down, but rein you in just because they were worried. I'm sure. Um,
Yeah.
but it is
Um,
interesting. I just always find it interesting how a person can go and do this big thing, and then when they come back, like that wasn't enough. Like people want to know, when are you going back, or why you came back or whatever. Like it can't just be like, oh wow, you got to do this cool thing, good for you. Like it's not often that people are just happy for you and admire that you got to do a thing.
yeah. It it was awful. I mean, because I was just trying to be okay, and people were more worried about when I was going to do my next big thing, and I'm like, I'm just trying to survive right now. I almost died. Like,
Yeah.
can I just get my sea legs back for a second? Like,
Yeah.
I'm back home. Do you have questions about like what I learned or anything maybe?
That gets back to that whole thing. I think I talked about my own story, how it's a performance-based religion. I mean, it's completely based upon your performance. They don't really care what you're learning. They don't care who you are. It's just, are you doing these things or not? It's just it's all about appearances and what you're able to do for them.
Right.
So you got back, you're getting back into normal life again. Where does life take you? I mean, because I guess you're getting close to, as you're getting close to 18, being a full-fledged technical adult in the United States, where does life take you?
A lot happens before I hit 18. Okay, so I'm still 15 in the story here.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go with it.
And anyway, Hurricane Rita hits that summer.
Okay.
Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Katrina hit back to back. Katrina, everybody knows, hit New Orleans, but Rita actually passed over my hometown, like the eye of the storm hit my hometown. Ooh. So there was a lot of damage. So I start working the relief work, like right away. We're hosting families in our house. I end up running the drink trailer under a brother, of course, but he was an older brother that liked to tell lots of stories, and he gave us the orders of what to do. But I organized the trailer, and there were lots of other sisters that came in and out, but I was the only one that was there consistently. So I did the final packing of the lunch and the orders and everything, and so that's what I was doing. And I met a couple of really good people. I actually met someone that I cared a lot about, but my best friend had a crush on him, so I didn't do anything about it at the time, but we stayed friends. His name was Nathan. But I also met another brother that would be my first boyfriend, my first real, out in the open boyfriend. And I met him through his mom. His mom worked in the drink trailer with me, doing the packing and everything. Mm-hmm. And he was a ministerial servant. And yeah, everybody talked about him and as being like this really, everybody wanted to date him because he was this, figure in the congregation. So, we started dating, and about 6 months into it, it got really scary. So I tried to break it off with him. That didn't go so well.
And what does scary mean? Was he starting to become abusive or something?
He was very controlling. He was very derogatory in his speech towards me. Started telling me, how lucky I was to have him because he didn't think anybody else would be able to put up with me. I wasn't subjective enough.
Oh, classic abuse signs, yeah.
Yes. So, I tried to end it, but it was this thing that everybody kind of wanted. My parents didn't really want it, but they didn't really know how to fight against it either because he was, this person in the congregation. They didn't want it just because they didn't want me dating at the time. So anyway, it became a thing. It was a long distance relationship because, like I said, they had traveled in to help with the relief work. And it ends up where I'm trying to break things off with him for good. And he ends up knocking me out and taking me back to his hotel room and beating me and, sexually abusing me for 4 days.
Whoa. Wow. When you say knocking you out, do you mean drugging you or physically knocking you out because he was physically abusive too?
I mean both.
Oh God. All right.
So I took a lot of hits. Wow. I have a small dent in my skull still. I was thrown at one point, and I was held under the water in the bathtub a few times to get my compliance because he got tired of fighting me. It was bad. It was really bad.
And so did no one worry where you were for 4 days?
No. When I came back from Mexico, I was so used to being on my own. So I got a car and I would crash my friends'
Okay,
couches. Stuff.
gotcha.
Like I was frequently gone. Pretty much lived in my car. And
Gotcha.
then, with my grandmother being abusive, at one point I was just living in my car to get away from her abuse. And then here I landed myself in this other abusive situation, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
And so this happened, and I went and one day he had fallen asleep, and I just walked out the door and I walked home. I now know that it was about 10 miles, but I just walked home because I knew where I was.
Yeah.
Once I got outside, I knew where I was, and so I just walked home. And I took a shower and didn't say anything about it for about 4 months. And then all hell broke loose. And it became a he said, she said thing. And I got reproved and removed off the Pioneer list. And he got reproved. And
Okay.
his privileges were taken away.
So
And
go
yeah.
ahead. All right. So in the 4 months that passed, or let's see, let me ask, how did it come out eventually? You said it took 4 months, and I totally understand how you were
So
where you were, but how did it come out?
After everything that had happened, he said to me that, that nobody's going to want you after what I did to you. And growing up where, immorality before marriage was such a bad thing, I figured he was right. So, he just started telling everybody that we were engaged, and I just kind of went along with it. So, I'm looking at a lifetime with this asshole.
Yeah.
And I'm
To put it
depressed.
lightly, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm depressed, and I'm just a mess, really. I'm a shell of myself. And one of my friends decides to take me out drinking, to celebrate. I'm 16. I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. Anyway, when I'm drinking, apparently, I told her what happened.
Hold on, whoa,
And
wait just a second. First of all, you're going out drinking at 16?
yep,
And that was okay with people apparently. And also,
just with her. We didn't tell anybody. I mean, we
gotcha,
were sneaking.
gotcha. Oh, so it's not like you went out to a bar or something. It's
No, I did. I mean,
oh,
remember, I'm curvaceous, I'm young, I can get
okay.
into bars. I can get into bars. It's the South.
Okay. All right. Also, also, so how old were you when he did this to you?
16.
And is that um what is the age of consent in that state? Is that okay? Is
17.
17? So then technically that would have been statutory rape.
Yes.
All right. And so I just okay. And so you spill the beans to your friend, which yeah, I'm sure you were just dying to tell somebody at that point. I'm sure internally somewhere in you really wanted to get this out of your system.
Probably. I mean, I'm a control freak, and it was the first time I'd really gotten drunk. So
Yeah.
it was, so I'm telling everything. And
Yeah.
anyway, she tells someone else, and that someone else tells a sorted version of the story where I snuck out to meet him and we had sex.
Okay.
So it becomes I told them, they told some, so it's a rumor now. And so that's how it became a he said, she said situation.
But still,
Um,
okay, so it gets to the elders apparently, and you end up having to go in front of them.
yep.
At that point, you tell them the actual version, I assume. And
Yes.
what is their response?
Well, you put yourself in this situation, and then they were asking about things that might indicate consent, such as, did I shave my pubic hair beforehand? Did I shave my legs? What position was I in? Did I ever go down on him?
Okay. Those are horrible
Bear in mind that
questions.
I had never even kissed anybody before I had met this guy.
Right. Right.
So this was like, you're asking someone who is a super innocent virgin, and I'm not trying to like play that up. It's just really the way
Right.
it was. I was sheltered. I grew up homeschooled. I was never exposed to anything like that. So, my only sexual experience at this point was forced. And they're
Yeah.
asking questions, and I don't even understand really what they're asking me.
And fuck them. It's none of their goddamn business. I mean,
Yeah.
they're talking to a minor like this,
With my parents sitting right behind me.
and your parents are allowing this to happen.
Yes.
That's a tough thing too, because they're grown ass people that you would think could speak up, but I understand they're under the cult spell too. How, like, do they? Who
They
fucking
asked me
cares if you
I
shave your legs? Like, it's such a.
because it indicates that I planned it.
But
That's
what I'm saying, I know that, but what I'm saying, I mean,
I'm like,
people
we're in the
shave their
South.
legs anyway. It doesn't matter.
Of
Like,
course I shaved my legs. Of
yeah,
course I shaved my like
like how you personally groom yourself or whatever, pubically or otherwise, is none of their goddamn business, and you can still get raped. It doesn't matter what you're wearing or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't mean it's not rape or it's not sexual assault or whatever. Like, it just shows how archaic their views are of this stuff. And the fact that they're subjecting a minor to this, it's unconscionable. It's disgusting. And I
Oh, and
understand they
he
have
was
their
4
internal
years older
court,
than
but
me, by the way.
what's
He was
that?
4 years older than me, by the way. So don't think that this was another little teenage boy doing this to me.
Yeah, but you're a woman, so it's always your fault, right? I mean, because you had to, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the way they look at it. It's almost like you're the temptress just by being
By
a
being,
woman.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And therefore it couldn't have possibly been he's just a predator. Oh God. All right. So you make it through the meeting. Do they just like, do they decide right then at the meeting what they're going to do to you? Or is that
Oh no.
okay.
Oh no. They made me sweat it out.
Oh, gotcha.
So I didn't know. And of course my parents are like, you've got to go to every meeting. You can't have it look bad, you know. And so I'm like, I'm still emotionally so incredibly fucked up right now. Like
Sure.
they and I've got to go to the meeting and put on a smile and have them announce that I'm no longer a pioneer in the congregation and have everybody ask me why, because they haven't made a decision as to whether or not I'm approved. So I can't tell them, oh, it's because we had a judicial meeting. Like, it's like I've got to come up with some bullshit.
And that's nobody's business either.
Right?
They're all
So,
so in everybody's business.
yeah. So, like, from the congregation's perspective, oh, well, she got sick and she came home from missionary work and now she's not even pioneering, but she doesn't look sick anymore. So, what's going on? She's really fallen here. you know? Like,
Which
it
is what it's
was,
about. Let's face it. It's not,
yeah.
I care about Andie and I want to see how she's doing. It's, oh, look, here's some gossip. Somebody fucked up in some way and I want to find out what it is,
Yeah.
so that I can be the one to hold the gossip and then we can all talk about this person and feel better about ourselves.
Yeah. So it comes out, it was 2 or 3 days later. Anyway, so like they had the meeting with me on a Wednesday. I had to go and listen to them make the announcement on Thursday about me no longer being a pioneer. Then by Sunday, they were announcing that I was, publicly reproved.
And
So,
was he following were the meetings with him following basically the same timeline?
no, his decision wasn't made until about a week later.
Gotcha.
So, um, yeah, because apparently they had to write the branch about him and figure out what to do. So they had to wait in responses and things. I asked my parents about reporting it to the police, and I went back and forth as to whether or not I wanted to go to the police. My parents told me that they already went and said that there was no case because there was no physical evidence, and I accepted that at the time. Later on, I found out that my parents never actually spoke to any police. Instead, the elders had advised them not to talk to the police. They talked to the elders and not the police. The elders advised them not to talk to the police because it would bring reproach upon the organization.
There you go. I like how you just said that. It would bring reproach upon the organization. They always say reproach upon Jehovah's name, but it ain't about Jehovah at all.
No.
It's about the organization, and that's all they care about. It's not about God.
I remember it wasn't bring reproach upon Jehovah. I remember that clearly. They were worried because here's the thing. There was another brother in the congregation at the time, and his name was, and he had already been convicted once of sexual molestation of a child. And he was about to go to court again because he had abused 11 other children in the area. So they didn't want another case of Jehovah's Witness sexual abuse in the area. Yeah. That brother, by the way, was not disfellowshipped at the time.
Oh, you say this guy wasn't disfellowshipped?
No. I mean, he had been disfellowshipped, but he was quickly reinstated. Yeah. Anyway, he was a piece of work. Anyway,
so what happens then? So clearly, yeah, this other guy has his own, well, I want to say
he lived in North Carolina, so like I never really saw the guy that did all that to me again, which, thank God.
But yeah, and and I'm really glad that you don't have to. But what about other people that have to see this guy? Do you know? So I guess, do you just not know whatever? I mean, is he just still probably a witness and out there doing his thing?
Probably. I mean,
Gotcha.
I talked at one point to a lawyer about pressing charges, and they told me that the statute of limitations had already passed.
Yeah.
And so I might go on record about what happened, but it wouldn't really do anything beyond that. So
yeah, but I just wanted to point out, I mean, okay, for anyone listening, so this is the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. You have a guy who beat and raped a woman for 4 days. Well, actually, let's say a girl, because 16,
yeah.
And this is statutory rape. Beat and statutorily raped a girl for 4 days, and yet he's still probably in the congregation and
doing fine.
And if this is a he said, she said type thing, if that's how they ended up taking it, then who knows if that story ever even went on his record, because they're not taking it seriously. So this monster is allowed to be loose, and a guy who is sick enough to do something like this probably isn't going to just suddenly wake up one day and become a model citizen toward the opposite sex. Like, who knows how many people he is hurting, and the organization is guilty in allowing that to happen. They're guilty because they discourage people from going to the police. They're guilty because they don't take this stuff seriously. they have every opportunity to protect the people under their care, which, if you're going to have your own fucking judicial system and all that stuff, then you can't claim that it's not your responsibility, because this stuff is absolutely your responsibility. You made it your responsibility by taking control of all of this and saying that you're going to handle it. So then you have to handle the outcome of it as well. So Jehovah's Witnesses are absolutely culpable in every bit of this because they choose to take it on. They could absolve themselves of it tomorrow by saying, this isn't our stuff to deal with, hand it to the police. It's not ours to judge. But because they decide they are going to be judge, jury, and executioner, then it is absolutely falls on them. And I don't care what they claim. It's a disgusting practice, and they foster this stuff within their own organization. For a group that talks about blood guilt just because you don't witness to somebody at a door in an opportune time, you're therefore blood guilty because you could have saved that person. They are absolutely blood guilty, rape guilty, just guilty because they permit this stuff to happen.
Yeah, but if they want to say that I'm condemned in some way, then they're blood guilty themselves for the reason, because I was gung-ho, I was a pioneer. If they hadn't had abused me so badly, I'd probably still be that way, which, you know, is neither here nor there. But you want to talk about what a horrible person I am and disfellowship me or whatever, because they were talking about disfellowshipping me over that whole situation. I'm like, you know, shame on them. They are blood guilty for so many people. I, after this all happened, attempted suicide. I was that distraught over it. I was that messed up over it. Which, I mean, when you think about all that happened, is not that crazy of a leap.
Oh no, I completely understand. It's this whole thing. I mean, I'm pissed off because it's just so horrible, and I feel for you. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that and deal with it alone, because none of the adults in the situation could handle it like adults, and you were expected to. So of course, you know, I'm sorry that you resorted, you know, that you felt the need to escape, possibly through suicide as well. I understand it. I'm sorry that you were pushed that far.
Thanks.
And I'm glad that you weren't successful.
Me too now. Yeah. At the time I didn't see any way out because, like I said, you know, fourth generation on one side, third on the other. Like, there was no other religious options. Like, and I didn't have any connections to the outside world really at the time, so I was being rejected by the only community that I knew. And I didn't
in
know
such a vulnerable time too.
Yeah, I was a little crazy after that. Like, I had PTSD. I would wake up in the middle of the night just screaming. And it got to the point where my parents would just ignore me. Because I was inconsolable. It was bad. My parents were, when they were sober, they weren't talking to me. When they were drunk, they were making fun of me. So it really was a lose-lose situation at the time. My relationship with my parents disintegrated pretty much at that period in my life. I wanted them back in my life so badly, but I couldn't handle being around them. So I just kind of left the house because my grandmother was out of control with talking about me. And at this point, like, remember, I had gone to live in Mexico, so my Spanish is pretty good at this point. My grandmother starts talking about me in front of me in Spanish because she somehow thinks I didn't learn the language. She doesn't believe that I actually speak the language. So she starts talking about me in Spanish in front of me. And I'm just looking at her like, you bitch. I know what you're saying. You just said that in front of me. She's calling me a slut. She's telling everybody that it was consensual, and I'm just doing this for attention. So at that point, you remember how I said I used to like pretty much live in my car? At this point, I actually start living in my car because I can't handle being there anymore. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, how could you? I'm sorry, I'm still stuck a little bit on your parents making fun of you, and it sounds like your grandma kind of was too, because I don't get what this thing is in people, um, where they have to. I don't. I, I guess I'm just kind of speechless. I hate bullies. I grew up in a household where I had issues. Like I have a condition called misophonia, where that's the people who want to kill people who make chewing noises. Um,
Oh.
it's an anxiety response.
Mm-hmm.
And I have misophonia, and I would sit there at the dinner table with my hands balled up in fists because I couldn't stand the noises around me. And when I would act like there was an issue, they would make fun of me instead of letting me like go from the table or something. And like it was, I mean, the stress that I would feel was it's just off the charts. And I found out later in life that there's a name for it. Anyway, enough about me. What I'm trying to say is that's why it hurts so much to see somebody being bullied for things that were out of their control, for things that were damaging to them, for things that were traumatizing to them. Like, it's the most fucked up thing for adults who are supposed to be your caregivers and who are supposed to love you and who are supposed to be there for you, and yet they don't see you. And when they do, they see you in like this negative. Like, my wife would say that her parents, her dad in particular, always thought she was up to no good no matter what she did. Like, he would always impute these bad motives and these like she was like this master like manipulator, and she was coming up with these grand schemes, and it was just crap that was in his head he was projecting onto her. And you see this stuff, and it's some of the most damaging stuff is done by our own families and the people that are supposed to love us. And like, you were in such a position here where you needed someone to wrap their arms around you and to tell you it was going to be okay and to love on you, and not somebody to make it worse. Like, how do you do that? It just blows my mind. The cruelty of humans.
A lot of people made it worse.
What's that?
A lot of people made it.
Oh,
a lot
really?
of people made it worse. It was bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad. Because on top of all this that was happening at home, I was also still, I had, like I mentioned, I had this relationship with God. And so I was still trying really hard to go to the meetings.
Sure.
And it got to the point where sitting in the Kingdom Hall, I would get hives just sitting there. Like, because the anxiety was so much, because after the meeting, everybody was coming up to me, when are you going to pioneer again? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? And I'm like, at this point, I have such a fear of even going to the door because I feel like I'm going to get taken again.
Yeah.
Like, it really messed me up bad, which, it's not a surprise, but still.
No. And isn't it amazing how our bodies sometimes know a thing before we know it? Like, your body was telling you, like, you don't need to be here.
Yeah.
It's breaking out in hives because it's like the physical response to the emotional and mental anguish.
Yeah. So at that point, like, I stopped going to the meetings for a while. And I really just tried to focus on getting a job and supporting myself because, at this point I'm living in my car. And I still go home occasionally. My parents need money because, they spent theirs, and I still take my sister out to lunch and stuff like that just to kind of maintain some normalcy in my life. And, my sister doesn't know what to think. and she's getting her fair share of it too, which I felt bad about because I felt like it was my fault at the time.
So what was she getting her fair share of?
The questions,
they
the
were asking her
isolation.
about you?
Yeah. There's a lot of gossip about me, and so of course that translated to gossip about our family, which included her, and so it got bad for her too, in a way, which I've always felt, bad about because I'm her big sister, I wanted to protect her. So she didn't know a lot of the details, so she didn't know what to say to people. Because I didn't really tell her a whole lot of what happened. Not until much later, not until she was older.
Well, honestly, she probably couldn't have handled it back then.
I couldn't handle it. So yeah, I didn't tell my little sister about it.
Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. And really, so like what I think what I'm trying to say is like it's not your fault. It's the fault of these other people who are coming to her with the questions. They were the ones in the wrong. They should never be doing that. It's very sick of them to do that.
Right. And my sister is uneducated. And I'm not saying this stuff to insult her. She's uneducated. She's naive. She's gullible. She's got a huge heart, and she will try and help anybody. So she sees me like drifting away from the organization and stuff. So her reaction is to jump in deeper.
Yeah. Just like yours with your
parents.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So it really is this vicious chain that happens when you pull away because stuff like that is happening. And this is all, I would say this is all how me waking up started. Like because I had always been told that we were this loving organization, and when somebody was, fumbling, we were going to take them in and show them God's love and really make them, feel it and help them back. And here I was struggling. I was lost. I was depressed beyond belief. I was anxious, and I had no one. And I didn't feel any of that.
Did anyone ever follow up with you or suggest therapy or anything, whether they believed your story or not?
I actually got pulled into the back room when I began going to therapy because I went to therapy.
And then you got in trouble for it?
And I got in trouble for it, yeah. Got talked to about it. Got counseled against worldly counsel.
They just can't get out of their own way. Like here you are finally trying to get some real help, and they have such a distrust of the outside world that they're counseling you over there. Wow.
My mom got wind of that, and so she's like, well, I'm going to supervise your counseling. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, whatever. At this point, I'm 17, so I'm still a minor. So if she wants to, kind of take control back, I didn't think that I had the power to take it away from her at the time. So she gets me in with a doctor and does not let me do any of the talking. My mom gives her perception of the situation. So the doctor diagnoses me bipolar, puts me on bipolar medication, and I go off the rails and I run away across the country to go see my friends. And I mean, I ran away like on a bus because my behavior is extremely erratic. And I went off the medication and I actually leveled out on the trip over there. Like I leveled out and I was back to being me, but I was not like in a healthy place either.
Sure.
So my friend tries to help me as best as he can. And but I end up coming back home. My parents' grip on me was really strong and they demanded I come home. So I came home. Things got really bad for a while, but I turned 18. And so I took my medical situation into my own hands and I talked to a doctor and they took the bipolar diagnosis off and put the PTSD, which is the correct diagnosis, on.
Sure. So did the bipolar medicine kind of make you manic or something?
Yeah, it really
Because you
did.
weren't bipolar?
Right.
Of course.
Because they had me on like Wellbutrin and lithium and all these things, and they were changing my medication way too fast too. Because I would be on the medication and my mom would be like, "It's not working. Change your medication." So like you're not supposed to change medications more than once every 3 months or so, and that's even fast. But I was changing them like every 2-3 weeks.
Can
So
anybody actually like? There is not an adult in this situation who is not inept. Like
right.
everybody is like you're a kid and everybody is just making this worse and compounding it.
So much worse. And so I'm going crazy. I'm not, and that's hard for me to say because everybody was telling me I'm crazy and I really didn't feel crazy at the time.
You were
And
just
it's hard
hurt.
to
Yeah.
say that. But I really was going crazy because the medication.
Yeah.
And so finally, when I stopped taking the medication and went to talk therapy, like actually just a therapist, I did not want any medication. I told them I was on a medication vacation. I was not taking any more medication for a while. It was the best thing that I ever did for myself.
Yeah.
It really was. Because in that therapy, I worked out a lot of my feelings about the rape and I filled in a lot of holes because I don't know if I mentioned this too much before, but I didn't remember a whole lot about that 4 days.
Yeah.
Which really bothered me. Like, I had holes. I remembered bits and pieces, and I would have nightmares and stuff, and I would just not know what was real and what was fake. So,
well, trauma will do that.
Yeah. So I worked out a lot of that in therapy. And I decided to go to college because after being reproved and all this gossip, I figured there was no way I was ever going to be a missionary again. In fact, the brothers actually told me that I would have to wait 5 years before I could even consider it. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do for 5 years? I can't just sit and do this. I'll go insane.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to college, which I caught all kinds of flack for.
Well, of course, you were trying to do something healthy, so
yeah.
Why would they encourage that?
Yeah, and I picked psychology. Initially, I wanted to go to school and help somebody the way that my therapist had helped me, because to me, it was the most amazing thing in the world how everything was suddenly making sense and feeling normal again.
Right.
So I wanted to learn more about that.
Sure.
And then I started, I remember I took an experimental methodology class and we talked about the case study of Jonestown.
Oh no.
And my mind was blown. My mind was blown. And I got really scared. I was so scared because I was like, oh my gosh, so much of this is so similar. And I don't want people to think that, I think that Jehovah's Witnesses are necessarily going to end up in a mass suicide. But I also want people to know that, that's not an impossibility based
sure.
on the degree of control that they have over their members.
Yep.
It's really not.
They get people to die with it because they refuse blood transfusions all the time.
Well, I was sitting in a Sunday meeting and the brother was given a talk. So I don't know if this was a widely given talk or not, but this one brother used an example because he was trying to talk about there was this point where they were talking about no more denim at the conventions because it sent the wrong message and people were not wanting to do it. So he starts talking obedience, and he's like, if the brothers came out with a pill to prepare you for Armageddon, would you take it? And everybody in the congregation is going, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like screaming inside, no. No, I would not take it. I would ask what's in it.
Yes. No, they would absolutely drink the Kool-Aid or the Flavor Aid, technically.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is really the conversation we're having, and I really just learned about Jonestown last week.
Yes. Yes.
It was really scary moment. I was freaking out. It was and I had only been to that meeting in a very long time because I was taking my sick aunt to the meeting. Like, because I said I had stopped going to the meetings, and I took her to the meeting, and that was the Sunday meeting, and I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I was scared. I was really scared. And it just, at that point, I was taking care of that aunt because she was so sick and her sister was sick. And I took care of them for a long time until I was like, I was going to school and I got into a car accident. And I lost my scholarship because the car accident was the morning of finals. I have like the worst luck ever.
Good grief.
And I lost the scholarship that I was going to school on. So I couldn't go to school. I couldn't live on my own anymore because the scholarship was giving me the money that I needed to like actually sustain myself. My friends were letting me crash in their dorm rooms for a time, but I ended up having to move back home for like a month. And then I got into touch with my aunt, who is, for lack of a better word, an apostate, has been for the last 20 years. And this is somebody that I myself shunned. Like, I had shunned her for a long time. And I told her that I was sorry, that things were bad, that I told her what had happened and where I was mentally. And she's like, sounds to me like you need a break. And I'm like, I do, but I don't know what to do. And she's like, you can come stay with me if you want to be in Alaska. And I was like, okay. So I moved to Alaska.
Whoa. That's not the South.
No. So, like, I had not seen this woman since my grandfather's funeral when I was 11 years old, and yet she took me in and took care of me and had and just handled everything. Like, she gave me time to find a job. She didn't charge me any rent or anything. She just took care of me. And she let me know my cousins, which was great. My only cousins that are not Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, wow.
They're two boys, and yeah, I saw this whole different side of life that I didn't even know was out there at all.
And where does that take you? I mean, does that attract you to the dark side?
It did. And I decided that I should go to a few meetings over there to see like if it was different, looking outside of my situation a little bit.
Right.
And I did, and in getting to know some of the sisters over there, I found out that a few of them had been through similar traumas that I had been through. And I was like, at that point, that just kind of proved to me that it wasn't an isolated incident, it was everywhere. Because I hadn't done any research or anything at this point. So, anyway, then I call my mom that day that I found all this out about. And before I can even tell her what I found out, she tells me that Paul Broussard is back in the congregation, convicted, and he's still not being disfellowshipped. Because he had a repentant heart, so they decided not to take action. So everybody's to treat him as if nothing happened.
As long as you're sorry for molesting children, it's okay. I mean, like, that's such an insane thing to say. Like, how could you?
So think about everything that I had been through. Think about everything I had been through, and then I hear this.
Oh my God.
I had moved to Alaska to get away from all the bullshit. And then they're telling me that it's just continuing on, like, no, nobody's business. And so that was the last meeting that I ever went to. It was the last time I ever even thought of myself as a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow. So what was it then that you were, what were the resources, let me say? It sounds like you were starting to do like some of your own independent research. What were you looking at, or what was helping you there before that awful conversation?
Before that conversation, it was just talking to my aunt. She never dissuaded me from being a Jehovah's Witness. She was very careful about that. And that's something I have to say, like, if you're trying to talk to your relatives, don't tell them, don't be a Jehovah's Witness. Just tell them that you're happy. Tell them that, tell them the kind of feeling that you have whenever you're around people that love you, because unconditional love feels a lot different than what conditional love feels like in that organization. And that was very attractive to me. That was the most attractive thing that anybody had ever shown me.
Absolutely.
So, after I had stopped going to the meetings, I started doing a little research online, because like I already had a taste in that psychology course, and I was like, I'm gonna research this. And I found some stuff by Stephen Hayson on adult mind control, and I learned about the bite model and different things like that, because I still had a lot of psychology books, so I could still research stuff. And then I found Mark and Cora were really helpful. I don't know if you know who they are or not, but they do YouTube videos, and they were extremely helpful to me. I created a fake Facebook account and started messaging them, and also Mike and Kim, and messaged John Cedars. He never really got back to me, but that's
you say he never got back to you?
No, he never really got back to me. Nothing against him. I'm just saying.
He's a busy guy. Actually, one of my friends.
He's really busy.
Yeah, one of my friends now actually handles a lot of the emails for him. Like, it's gotten to that point.
Maybe that's better.
Yeah.
This is like 6 years ago. So
yeah. I understand.
Yeah. So I started doing research, but then the thing that really like shook me was Mark and Cora did this one section, and they quoted a Bible verse, and I think I should have looked this up before we talked, but it was I think it's in either 1st or 2nd Peter, and it's about how Jesus was preaching to the lost souls while he was at rest after he had been put to death. And I'm like, how was he preaching if he was dead? Who was he preaching to if everybody else was dead? Like, it contradicted so many things. And I was just, oh my gosh, it doesn't make sense. And that was that scripture and that listening to them reason that out was really what woke me up religiously from the organization. So I had already separated myself, secularly from them, because I didn't agree with what they were doing as far as handling the child abuse cases. But then I woke up religiously, and at that point, I actually wrote my letter and disassociated.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't want my name attached to them anymore, because now I knew not only were they mishandling child abuse, everything they were about was a lie.
Yeah, they mishandled scripture as well.
They mishandled scripture, they mishandled child abuse, they mishandled people. Like, the whole thing was a lie.
Yes, it was.
On any part. Like, I know that probably sounds, insensitive to some people, but like, I didn't know what to think about how they handled my case. I didn't know anything about the other, child abuse cases worldwide at the time. Shortly after that, the Australian Royal Commission happened, and it was like, whoa. Like, whoa. This is not just here and there. This is everywhere. Okay, wow.
Absolutely.
But,
So then when did you disassociate? How long has it been?
It's been, let's see here. It's been almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in April.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my parents still talk to me afterwards. That's the thing that's weird about my case versus most people. My parents didn't start shunning me officially until I decided to get married. And I married an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And they asked me to choose to come back to the religion and leave my future husband at the altar. even though they were catering the wedding and had been previously supportive of the wedding, there was a special assembly right before the wedding was scheduled. The wedding was in May, so they had just had their like summer district convention. And they came back saying that, you know, after the wedding, they weren't going to have anything to do with me unless I left the guy at the altar and did not get married, and came home with them and went back to the meeting.
Sounds normal.
So,
you know?
anyway, yeah.
You know, it's just crazy. You know, the stuff that they say. Yeah. Like, that's just not how humans behave.
Right. Exactly.
Normal humans are excited that you found somebody to love and that you're getting married. Like, that's how normal, supportive human beings react. This going to a convention and suddenly changing your mind, that just shows you're under the spell of a cult.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really bad. This was 3 days before my wedding. They had flown up, you know, from Louisiana to come see me. And my mom was supposed to be cooking all the food and everything, and they went off, and me and my mom were at, like, I kind of put all of that on the back burner because there's so much wedding stuff to do, but me and my mom were sitting in my living room of the house that me and my fiance at the time lived in together. Like, it was his house too. And she starts bashing him because she thinks that he's responsible for me leaving the religion.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, okay, I know I got with him very soon after I left, but I already had left. Like, I was already out. He's not responsible. You know, and we ended up getting into an argument and things were said on both sides. I lost my temper too, but it ended up that being the last conversation that me and my mom have ever had.
Did she even attend the wedding?
No, I actually had said that if she didn't want to be a part of my life, I didn't know why she wanted to be a part of my wedding, and she said, well, then fine, I'm not coming. And I said, okay.
Well, I mean, what you said was perfectly reasonable.
So
there's no reason to go.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know why you're going to cook for it and all this stuff if you don't support it, if you don't want to be in my life. Like, I don't know why you're doing this. It didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, either get in or get out.
Yeah, and my dad found out about the conversation a little later, and the thing is, my dad is not in really as much as he would like everybody to think that he is. He has a lot of doubts. He is in mentally still, but he's not as in as other people, and he did not want to choose between me and my sister and my mom. He begged me to come back and fake it.
Right. Because that's what he's doing, probably, on some level. Yeah.
And I said I couldn't live my life as a hypocrite, and at that point I told him that I couldn't go back even if I wanted to, because I actually had baptized myself, name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, at my local church. Which, you know, is a big no-no as a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
It's a sin against the Holy Spirit, so they won't really take you back after that. And I really I like knowing that in a way, because there are times when I miss my family and stuff so much, but it's not even an option for me to go back. And I really like that.
Yeah, and honestly, it doesn't sound, I mean, like, I understand that you miss your family, but it doesn't sound like they were super healthy for you.
No,
unfortunately. I think a lot of times we end up missing like a version of our family like we wish it would be.
I think I miss the idea of my family more than anything else.
Me too. I understand. I definitely understand.
Yeah, like I miss these certain moments, like with my dad riding in the truck and just listening to rock music and going to these hole-in-the-wall restaurants and just hanging out. Like, I miss days like that, because me and my dad had a pretty good relationship. You know, obviously when he was sober, he went through periods of sobriety, and, you know, we had a really good relationship when he was sober. He was my best friend when he was sober.
I wonder what he would be like if he was never, if he wasn't, if he could take a stand and if he could get free from it. I wonder if it would
He would
help
be
his
the coolest dude
sobriety.
ever. He would be the coolest dude ever. I
Yeah.
think it would absolutely. Like,
I don't think you can live a life that is psychologically broken like that, where you're pretending to be things and all that. I don't think you can be that inauthentic and be happy. So I think you have to turn to something as an escape.
yeah, I think so too. Um, and you know, even my mom, I think, because the thing about my mom is that me and her are so much alike personality wise. The big difference between us, I feel like, is the way that we dealt with trauma, because my mom went through similar traumas to myself growing up. Very similar, in fact. And I didn't know that until later. But um, my mom never went to therapy. My mom never did any of that. She had to kind of bottle it up and move on. And I think that if I would have done that, I would probably just repeat the cycle like she has.
Yeah. Yeah. You can just see the
Um,
projection in some of the stuff, the making fun of you or the way she was about therapy or whatever. Like she's projecting. She's not seeing you, she's not taking care of you because she never took care of herself, and so she's still lost in that.
Right. And another thing I've learned in psychology is when you go through a trauma, if you don't deal with it, you're mentally still stuck in the age that that trauma happened.
Yep.
So my mom's maturity level is probably stuck somewhere in 17, 18 years old.
Yeah. You ever see or I don't know. You may be too young. There was a radio show back in the day. I don't know if it still exists, called Love Line, and it was like Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla, and of course, it wasn't something probably as a witness you were supposed to be listening to, but it was interesting at times. But
I
Dr.
don't know.
but Dr. Drew would always notice. So you would hear somebody call in. It was oftentimes a woman, and they would have um, a little girl voice, like their voice sounded like a little girl. And he could point out that, and oftentimes they were abused. There was some sort of trauma at an age when they were a little girl, and it's like their voice kind of stayed that way. And I always found that really fascinating. Of course, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that everyone can be judged by their voice or whatever. It does, I'm not saying that, but these people were calling in with some sort of an issue, and they had the voice, and oftentimes it did correlate with some abuse. And it is amazing how even physically, on some level, we stay stuck when we don't deal with certain things. And physically, mentally, emotionally, people get stunted to some degree, and it's really sad.
My neck is messed up. Not necessarily, like I've been in a couple car accidents, but my chiropractor said it's messed up because I spent most of my life looking down. I remember I have a hard time looking up. I'm a very short person. I have a hard time looking up and staring people down, which is really hard too because I'm a teacher, so I'm kind of required to do that.
You need to teach very small
I,
children.
I teach high schoolers.
Yeah.
I teach high schoolers, and a lot of them are taller than me, and I have to, project myself as an authority figure. It is very difficult. It's probably the most difficult thing that I do, and I teach, Pythagorean theorem, and yet that's the most difficult part of my job.
Yes.
Just remembering to look up.
Well, I understand. I have neck problems too. I've had to go to the doctor for TMJ disorder, and a lot of it is just caused by looking down and the stress of living in an environment like many of us grew up in. And many people hold tension in their necks anyway, and their jaw, and all of that kind of goes together. And once or twice a year, I'll wake up and my head's kind of stuck to one side or the other if I get stressed, and it just is what it is. And it's part of growing up in that dynamic and where we hold stress. So I completely understand. I just don't have to teach people that are taller than me.
Yeah. It's, yeah, it's a lot to handle, and like I said, I've done a lot of research since then, and I have a lot of feelings for my family and about
Yeah,
my family that, it's hard to resolve without being able to talk out with him. But
absolutely.
I am shunned, and my sister shunned me even before I lived in Alaska because she could tell where I was going with things, and
Yeah.
she's like, "I'm not going to talk to you until you come to your senses." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's going to be a while." Like,
Yeah.
what can I say?
The pre-shunning shun. Yes.
Yeah. And now that I've disassociated and everything, I thought that was going to be the final straw for my parents, but it wasn't. And I actually moved back to Louisiana because I recognized in myself that, like, I was in a sense running away when I left here, and
Mm-hmm.
I missed certain things about home. I missed certain people. I have lots of friends that, well, I say lots, I mean like 4 or 5, but to me that's a lot.
Yeah.
I have lots of friends that I grew up with that have left the Jehovah's Witnesses. I actually live with one of them, um, and it's been really nice to be back home in the South where I at least feel kind of at home. And I moved back after my divorce, and that was really hard to go through divorce without any family besides my aunt, who is amazing, as I've said, and
Mm-hmm.
she does her best, but it's really not the same as having your mom and your dad and your sisters and like everybody to support you. It was just my aunt,
Yeah.
which, I mean, she's incredible, and I can't say that enough, but I would have liked to have my mom or my dad there, or
Oh, I
my sisters
totally
eventually.
understand. Yeah.
Marriages fall apart, and that just kind of is what happened. And there was a lot that went wrong, and that was really hard. Like,
Well, sure. And I mean, you know, I don't know. I mean, you're 28 now. I mean, like we all get married and coming from the environments that we came from, we all bring a lot of dysfunction into it and a lot of pain and a lot of unresolved stuff and it's difficult to.
I will say that a lot of it, sorry, I'm just gonna say a lot of it was probably, like I said, I married an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but he had never been to therapy,
Mm,
and he didn't want to go, and he fought against going, and then when things got rough, he acted out and he cheated, and that's
gotcha.
ultimately what ended our marriage. And I think that it goes back to that maturity thing that I talked about before.
Sure.
Like, he didn't know how to maturely handle the situation.
Yeah, there are a lot of very immature people that are in or come out of Jehovah's Witnesses. Seems like a lot of the brothers in particular are very immature. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know if that comes from like living in like such a patriarchal environment where men are just given certain control or whatever instead of having to earn it. I don't know, but yeah, there are a lot of very immature brothers in the I don't know. I guess I wasn't around people on the outside either, and I know that they say that men mature a little later than women in different ways, so maybe that's it. I don't know, but I don't study that. but but definitely a lot of immature guys in the organization.
There are, and man, don't even get me started on what it was like trying to date inside the organization after everything happened, like
Yeah.
after that first guy. Like, it was rough.
Oh, I'm sure.
Um, yeah. So, I mean, the only guy that I dated afterwards, soon after, I mentioned it before, but like I met the one guy that my friend had a crush on during the relief work,
Hmm.
and I actually got with him, and I kind of used over this part, but me and him got together and actually got engaged and everything, and then he died of brain cancer. So I
Goodness.
just couldn't get a break at like trying to date and trying to get out there, and found somebody and then they died. It was like
Wow. And he must have.
I was
So, how old was
heartbroken, but
he?
He was 21 when he passed.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah, you're just facing trauma after trauma after trauma in your life.
Yeah. It's funny because, now I work with ACEs scores, which anybody who's familiar with that is, it's a scoring system to come up with risk factors based on your traumas. And I have the highest ACEs score that my therapist had ever dealt with. Because I have complex traumas. So
do you get a trophy for that or something? Certificates?
Yeah, I should, right?
You should get something for it.
Maybe.
So, all right. So
maybe I can make them and give them out to the members.
So you've been through so much. You're in school now. So where are you now in life? Like, what's good about life now, and what are you looking forward to in the future?
So I've been divorced for about a year, and I'm dating again. I have a really great boyfriend that is really supportive. I'm actually at his family's house right now.
Awesome.
Because I mislooked at my calendar. I didn't look at it right. But he's got 2 kids, and we all live together, and it's just really great right now, along with the friend that I mentioned that used to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all live together, and it's a lot of fun. I'm in school. I'm doing really good. I volunteer with a suicide prevention program in the local area for teens. And I'm really excited about that program. And we're working to get legislation changed in Louisiana to get teachers more paid training on how to deal with suicide prevention. So if a student comes and talks to them and tells them that they're having those kinds of thoughts, what can they say?
Yeah.
What happens at that point? So trying to get more paid training for that. Then also looking forward to doing my residency this summer in my social work program. I go to Capella University right now, and it's all online. So grades should be coming out any day now. Finals were last week. So hopefully I got a good mark. But I get scholarships, academic scholarships, which help with the student loans. So crossing my fingers about that.
Nice.
Like I said, I work as a teacher. I teach ACT prep. So I try and help kids get good scores so they can get scholarships and they can go to college, because the areas that I teach in are the schools that really don't have a lot of funding. So statistically speaking, the scores are lower over there because of that. They don't have access to everything that the higher funded schools have access to, like tutoring programs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a high ACT score can easily get a kid a scholarship. So that's what I teach. I teach how to pass the test taking strategies, and also just the basics of what kind of math is on the test, what you can do to pick out where a comma goes and stuff like that. So I teach all 4 subjects. Yeah, so that's where I'm at right now. Ultimately, I want to open up a research, an outreach center here to help people, because I feel like mental health and also transportation issues contribute a lot to people's limited access around here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think an outreach program where I could network with other organizations would be really beneficial to my community. So I'm trying to head that up. I already have a few people interested in investing, so I just have to finish my degree so I can get it going, because I have to have a master's in order to write the proposal for the grant that I need to start the program.
That is awesome. I mean, it really sounds like you've taken, all of your own traumas and such and made something beautiful out of it, where you have done things to help yourself. You can do things to help others. And I think that's one of the highest purposes a person could have, to help other people.
I think that's one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten. So thank you. But the way I saw it, I had two choices. I could either let the trauma define me and it could be negative, or I could embrace that this happened and see what I could do to fix it.
Yeah, that's
because
great.
now that I know that, you know, the world is not worldly, like, I'm in the world. So I'm not separate. And Jesus didn't say for us to be separate. He said, go out into the world. You know, he gave people food. He helped people in practical ways. So I'm going to help people in practical ways. Like, that's something that the Jehovah's Witnesses don't do. They help each other, but they don't really help other people.
And really, how much do they help each other?
Right.
We just talked about all the ways they failed you. I mean, there wasn't a lot of help going on there for Andie.
No, they only helped me when I was doing something for them.
Right.
So, right. But like, I'm going to go out. I'm going to, try and change the world as much as I can for the better.
It's a beautiful thing. I'm really glad that I got to talk to you, that I got to meet you, that I hope that telling some of these things, talking about some of this stuff is cathartic in a way. I know it's probably not easy, especially some of the trauma and everything, but I know that it can be beneficial to talk about this stuff. And I don't know. I just really, I respect the way that you've handled it all and the way that you've been able to take it and make something good out of it. Like, I think that shows a lot about you, your character, the strength that you have to take that stuff and turn it around into something good. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun for me. I hope that it gives people that have been through similar things kind of a different perspective. Maybe can help them. I'm in the Facebook group, so if anybody wants to talk to me, they can. I'm always up for, a good chat with people. I like debating things as long as it doesn't turn into arguing about things.
Well, hopefully the Facebook group's a little more supportive and a little less debatey.
I think it is. I think it's not. Maybe debate's not a good word. Discuss. I like discuss things. Sure. And I've been really enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. I had fun today. Hopefully everybody's getting involved with the registry thing. Congratulations to Jenny and Ryan.
Yeah.
So if anybody hasn't seen, they're getting married. So that's on the Facebook group. And it's just been a lot of fun for everybody to kind of be there for each other, which I feel like is just an extension of what I'm trying to do in my life right now, and being there for other people. Like, so what you do is also really awesome. You're connecting people in a really great way.
I want to thank Andie for being so open and honest about her life. It's not easy to talk about these things. Some of these things get kind of dark at times, but she was brave in facing them at the time. She's brave in talking about them now. And I know she did it because she wanted to try to help others out there. At one point in the interview, she talked about a group and how happy she was to support Jenny and Ryan. So what she was referring to was the Shunned Podcast Facebook group. Jenny is actually the same Jenny that was on episode 22 of the podcast. She's a member of my group, and she was getting married to a man named Ryan. As you know, most of us that are shunned really don't have much of a support group or much support at all. In times like these, we probably don't have family to throw us a wedding shower. So I had an idea, and I threw her a virtual wedding shower on the Facebook group. I had her put together an Amazon wish list, and we posted funny wedding gifts and stories and gave advice, and just helped her to get some things that she and her new husband needed as they started their life together. So it was a pretty big hit. It was a cool idea. People had fun with it, and I know Jenny and Ryan really appreciated it. So these are kind of the things that we do in the Shunned Podcast Facebook group. I've tried to build a very supportive environment, and people really do care for one another there. So if you'd like to join, feel free. I know the guy who runs it. I'll get you in. So it's the Shunned Podcast group on Facebook, and we have a good time there and support one another. Before we end this episode, I'm going to make mention of what I decided to do for my birthday that I mentioned last episode. I had never found anything that really got me excited about my birthday, and somebody suggested something, actually in the Facebook group I just mentioned, that sparked this idea. So what I'd love to do for my birthday is to hear from you. I'd love a birthday card or a photo of your family, out being happy, or a picture drawn by your kid, whatever you want to send me. I love getting mail, but I rarely get anything other than bills. So I got a P.O. box that people can send things to, and I'd love to get something if you'd love to participate. So maybe I'll do something special with the things I get. Again, just no Return to Jehovah brochures. The address is P.O. Box 2641, Clarksville, Indiana, 47131. And I'm going to put this address in the show notes if you're interested. You can find them on the episode post at shunnedpodcast.com, along with the other resources mentioned in this episode, as well as on your podcast app. If you're using that, you can probably just go to the description there and you'll find all the details there. But you'll find that P.O. box, how to donate if you choose to support the work I do. Again, if you have any interest in coaching, you can reach out there as well. I love doing this. I love you guys that listen. I love to help. So connecting in these ways means a lot to me with what I put into all this. The theme song for the podcast, as always, is No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And as we end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God.